Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, it's one of the shows that I really love to do, where my co-host Chris Tarr gets to tell us about the things he's been doing. And Chris is one of these engineers where, he analyzes situations from several perspectives. He's got a big heart and a really big brain. And he can fix things, the technical part and the underlying motivation part. Great stories, good information, all upcoming next. Chris Tarr on This Week in Radio Tech.
This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store, with outstanding service, savings, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics, with the Bionic Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Air, featuring Playout One radio automation software, comprehensive streaming solutions, website content management, and social media tools for maximum listener engagement on the web at AIIR.com. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts.
Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to that light bulb, that one at the top of the tower. Hey, I'm Kirk Harnack, delighted to be here with you, and I'm glad you've joined us. We're going to try to have an amazing show. In fact, I have a feeling we are going to have an amazing show. So I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm in my Telos Alliance office here with so much Telos Alliance accoutrement all around me. And but I'm just here to listen and ask a few questions, because the star of the show is on another camera in another state, in another city, he's in a basement like I am.
Yeah, exactly.
It's Chris Tarr. Hey, Chris, welcome in. Good to see you, man.
Howdy. Welcome to my mess. My youngest is going to college here in another month or so. So we're, storing all of the stuff that's going to college there. So it's a mess, but here we are.
You've got some rhyme and reason to the room, though. Now, is all that stuff arranged by Dewey Decimal or Library of Congress system?
Well, Amy's in charge of that. She's really good at it. I'm not. I'm just like, throw it over there in the corner. I'm good with that. She's actually very organized. So, but yes, it's been taking over my space. Plus, I'm not going to lie. Some of these boxes are my mess, but there we go.
Well, Chris, actually, I was looking at the weather yesterday and today across Wisconsin, and it looked to me like you guys had some serious rain in the last 24 hours. Am I wrong? Am I right?
No, you're right. Fortunately, it was north of here. We didn't get a ton of rain here. We got a couple of showers, but there were actually a couple of tornadoes. And I think today NWS is going up there to investigate right near one of my stations up in the Reedsburg Portage area. There's like 4 or 5 different tracks that they were interested in. So it was pretty nasty.
Wow. Yeah, they have a checklist like, okay, broadcast tower down, that's got to be an F3.
Yeah, right. Or a very bad day for whoever owns the tower.
Well, let's see. We found 4 toupees. That could be an F0. It really could.
Exactly.
It's interesting. They do have checklist criteria that helps them determine what enhanced Fujita scale that the tornado was on. Well, Chris, so what we've done today, we've done this a couple times in the past, even this year, but it's even a modified topic. What we've done is Chris Tarr stays so busy and has such a variety of projects that he works on, some short-term, some long-term, most of them interesting, a couple of them, we wouldn't bother talking about. But so Chris has built up a number of different projects that he's really good at relating at both, the wisdom, the underlying challenges, what actually got done to solve these problems, to make them get solved and move forward, and in the best interest of the broadcaster, the listening public, and of course the best interest of Chris Tarr. So, Chris, you have saved up a few interesting chapters in your engineering life for us today, right?
I have, yeah. We'll talk about, there's a station I just posted on Facebook today that I did a filing for they're acquiring a new station. The entire story behind that is really, really good. Let's see, I've dealt with recently some troubleshooting with a storm that came through. What else? We could go for a while here on this, some of the things I've been dealing with. So yeah, I guess we'll start with the start. let's talk about the project I just got done working on.
Well, tell you what, I'm gonna have people hold on through the break,
okay,
because Chris is going to relate this story to us. And yeah, I did see the post on Facebook, and I thought, oh, Chris is on today. This would be a good thing to talk about, and you're very enthused about it. So it has to do with previous work you did with a station, and they said, can we do this other thing too? And Chris said, I can help that happen. I can make that happen for you. So, all right, This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by some amazing sponsors, and I'm very appreciative of our audience paying attention to the ads, determining if this sponsor's product is going to help you or not, or if it's a product that has to do with someone else at your radio station, like the program director or the music director, that you go talk to that person and relay the information to them. It's really helpful, and I appreciate it. So does Chris. So does Suncast, our producer, because I got to pay him. So let's check these guys out. The people at AIIR.com, they want you to know about this new product that they have and a special deal that they're offering. Hey, if you're tired of wrestling with clunky music scheduling software, well, meet AIR's Music Scheduler. It's powerful scheduling, it is simplified, and it's right in your browser. With drag and drop clocks, reusable templates, you can build a day's playlist or an entire month in literally moments. You can import your existing library. Yeah, it does that. Or you can start fresh and then assign categories, commands, and audio with lightning speed. The cloud-based platform frees you to schedule literally anywhere because it's cloud-based. No installs, no headaches, and with fully customizable rules for artist separation, for tempo, for flow, for title, for thresholds, and more. You'll always hit your station's unique sound. It works. And, the thing about not having to install anything, your computer blows up or you leave it somewhere, or, it falls off the roof of your car and into the ditch, you can still schedule. You can see issues highlighted in real time when there are issues in scheduling, get instant fix suggestions, and, hey, I can't follow that rule. No, I can't do 6 Barbra Streisand songs in a row. And you can export logs effortlessly into, of course, Playout 1, but also into Wide Orbit, Myriad, Play It Live, Station Playlist, and the list is growing. You can try AIR Music Scheduler for free now through September of this year. After that, it's $60 a month per station. So if you're ready to simplify your scheduling, visit AIR.com, AIIR.com/scheduler, and sign up for it. This is awesome. Really good stuff. And thank you, AIR, Ricky Lee, and everybody there for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, Chris, we're going to schedule you now. Tell me.
I am not drag and drop, by the way.
You're going to tell us about a station that you started helping a long time ago. What was the story?
Yeah, so this is actually pretty fascinating. I was 11 years ago. I got a phone call right around Christmas from a woman just south of the Wisconsin-Illinois border in Antioch, Illinois. And she said, hey, I got your name from somebody, and we have this radio station. We've got this construction permit that's going to expire. We're a nonprofit, and we're just really struggling. We need to get this thing on the air. And, we just are almost done with the tower. The tower crew kind of stiffed us, and we just don't know what to do. And I said, okay, well, then, I could probably help you out with that. Give me a call after the holidays and we'll set something up. She went, well, our construction permit expires in 3 weeks. And I said, excuse me? And, not only did her, was the construction permit expiring, it was a directional antenna, a directional FM, and all these kinds of things. And, some of the stuff was there. They didn't know what to do with it. So the bottom line is I said, okay, if you can get a group of people together and do what I tell you to do when I tell you to do it, so I think we can probably make this work. So I got a tower crew out there, got them to finish the tower, get the antenna up. I got their transmitter. There were some issues there that I had to take care of. I worked on at least getting a temporary STL set up for them. And we got the station on the air one day before the construction permit expired. So we got really lucky there. I had to had to track down a surveyor to survey the antenna orientation to make sure that was right, and it was off by a degree. So we had to work with, Shively to make sure that that was okay to, redo the paperwork for that. So, we got all through that, and the day before, turned the power on, and it was on the air, and hallelujah. They're a Catholic programming station, do some EWTN stuff and some local stuff. And we started to talk after the smoke had cleared, and just kind of chatting about things. And it turns out that they had a volunteer who I'm sure meant well, but really only knew enough to be dangerous when it came to radio. And I said, so, do you have your EAS set up? Do you have all these things? I don't know what you're talking about. Said, oh, really? Wow. Yeah. So basically, this is a Catholic nonprofit organization, and they fought for quite a while to get this allocation. They had another bidder that was just every turn, was challenging their applications and all this other stuff. And it's run by just a fantastic woman, but who's never been in radio before, has no experience, but. I think her sister kind of did the same thing over in Massachusetts, and I do some consulting for them. So it was kind of in her heart to do this, and really wanted to work on this and get this going, but she didn't know where to start. And somebody who is kind of a radio kind of guy befriended her to get in the door and really kind of wreck this thing. And so I said, you got to get some paperwork done. You've got to do this. You got to do that. She looked at me and said, I don't know what to do here. I mean, she's like, I guess I need some help. So, I said, okay, well, I'll get you started. I'll help you get everything set up. I've already come this far. Let me help you get set up. I got the EAS set up. I, showed them how to do the public file and all these other things. And that, I figured that was it. Well, here I am 11 years later. They really, they're such wonderful people, and they really, want to do this right. And, so I'm very fond of them. They're very fond of me. And it just worked out that, that my particular set of skills, worked out well for them. So, we built on a very, very low budget. I mean, most of this stuff was donated sound equipment and things. So we patched something together and got them a studio. And so over the years, I've taken care of all their issues. I handle all their FCC paperwork and, handle all the discussions that we have with different various regulatory things and equipment issues. And, I got them into voice over IP stuff and, just over the years, various upgrades. Well, about a year or two ago, she came to me and said, and again, they don't have a ton of money. So, but they do have a benefactor who has some money, is willing to help out. She said, well, we really would like to get a second signal and cover more people. Now, they're in just north of Chicago. So as you can imagine, there aren't a lot of opportunities there. Yeah. So she, kept looking around, and she, every week I'd get, hey, what about this? What about that? And most of the ideas were just crazy because she didn't know what she was talking about with radio. I said, well, I know what you're saying, but that won't work. Then for a little bit, we managed to get her on an AM in Chicago, big AM in Chicago that really they're trying to sell the station. They needed programming to fill the slot. So they got them on there, and they wanted a lot of money. And that was the other thing that I was kind of helping her with is, they I try to put this nicely. They spotted a sucker every time she talked to these different radio groups, because they'd go, well, she has no idea what this is worth. So yeah. Oh, it's $1.5 million. She'd come and go, well, this, it's AM daytime station in suburban Chicago. They want $1.5 million. I'm like, yeah, they're smoking crack or something. So we've been navigating that in the past year, especially. And it turns out that just south of where they are, where their signal really kind of ends, they have a little bit of a directional signal. There was a non-com that just went through this last round of applications and constructions of non-commercial stations in this last window. And they built it and then realized that it wasn't really going to serve them to do what they wanted to do. And they actually reached out to us and said, hey, we have this radio station available, and we're not interested in it. It's just not going to work for us. Would you be interested? So that started a whole round of the whole negotiations and trying to go back and forth. And unfortunately, as you can imagine, communications attorneys, they're worth it, but they're also very expensive. And she just couldn't afford to have an attorney handle all of this, the negotiations and the contracts and everything else. So I had to step in and do that too. So, I go from building the stations to maintaining the stations to being the janitor at the stations to now, handling, this purchase. So we sat down and I came up with an asset purchase agreement, and I worked out the details of the purchase. And just yesterday, I filed the paperwork with the FCC, and it showed up in the database. And I got to call her and say, okay, we've made it through this hurdle. But now the next step, I've got to be able to hook these stations together, and they're going to simulcast. So I've got to sort that out. And, we have to now work on getting the tower lease turned over to us. And so it's a lot of work, but it's interesting because you've got a group of people who truly believe in the power of radio, but have no idea how it works. And they just know that it does. And they know that it's a great way to get their message out. So that's why they do it. They believe in it, and they believe in the power of what they're doing. But, just like we see a lot of times with LPFMs and things that don't last long, they had no idea what they were getting into. I mean, they just didn't know all of these things in the background that you have to do as a licensee. And while it's still not as difficult as running a commercial license, there's still ownership reports and issues in programs and all those sorts of things. And they had no clue getting into this what that was all about. So I always kind of joke that I basically adopted them because they really, they were going to be stuck, and I felt so bad. And they don't pay me much money. I mean, it's a token, whatever. But I felt really bad because they so much believe in what they're doing, and they're very passionate about it. And obviously, they felt that this was a good way to get their teaching out, and that sort of thing. But it was kind of like I remember that. Well, first of all, the conversation about the directional antenna and the construction permit, to say, well, we got 3 weeks. I'm like, you've had years. What are you doing? And they're like, well, we didn't realize what was involved. Like, you probably early on should have gotten somebody who knows what they're doing with this. Yeah. And, like the tower crew didn't put all the bolts in the tower when they assembled it. And I mean, it was really, because she didn't know, everybody took advantage of her. And, so I finally had to come in and crack the whip and get these people to get things done and rush. And there were a few times where I kind of went, I don't know that we can do this. But everybody stepped up. Vendors, we had an hotel, and there were some issues with how it was configured. They actually were able to get one for her right away, took it off the line so that we had it in time, but it was configured for something else. And so I had to go in and change some wiring inside. And I think it was SCMS who did the vendor for most of the stuff. They stepped up. I was able to get, again, a local surveyor to get the stuff done there. So it was, it was really an interesting thing that I'd never run into before. And then again, like I said, afterwards, when it's finally on the air and they're all excited that everything's going, and then they go, okay, now what? The stuff's on the air. What do we do? And so, along the way, I've taught them a little bit about that. I will tell you, the first time that they experienced ducting in the non-com band, my phone rang for a week. It was like, something's wrong. No, nothing's wrong. They're running too much power. No, they're not. On that, non-com frequency, everybody's wedged in there. And then you get the lake effect with Lake Michigan and the ducting. And I'm like, you just kind of have to deal with it. And, that's the way it is. So that's why they were, one of the reasons they were looking for another signal. And, same kind of thing. They're getting these people offering $2 million and, no, it's not worth it. I had to go through even just simple things like, she would look at population counts as a method of value. So, well, this one has 1 million people. Well, that's great, but it's an AM station, so you're not going to get 1 million people listening to it.
Right.
And, you've got to figure out maintenance. And so I had to work with her on, okay, what you really need to know is the cost per person to, that you're reaching. And, if you're looking at a station that's close into Chicago, your operating expenses are crazy. And, so I like before you even start the month, you're in $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 in just operating expenses. Having an FM with a tower you own, you don't really pay that much day to day right now. You start picking up one of the stations they looked at was a directional AM. And I said, do you understand, how much goes into running those? Just even lawn care for it. It's just crazy. I'm like, you're going to be in the hole every month. So, it's things like that where, they have no idea what they're looking at. And I'd have to sit there and say, listen, here are the pitfalls with this. But long story short, it really, it makes me feel good. I mean, these guys are so excited and they're so happy. And to have been able to help them with that, it's just been fantastic.
Through this whole story, Chris, as an engineer, I'm sure many people in our audience can relate to, especially contract situations where they've been then asked to help somebody out, or I was asked to help somebody in kind of a similar situation many years ago, and it is amazing the things that they don't know. They want the baby, but they know nothing about the gestation period or even
right.
how the baby gets created, really. It got me thinking, are there other businesses or endeavors where this same thing happens? And I'm sure there is. I'm sure there are. Let's say I really want to be a weekend race car driver. I love the dirt track and the drifting or whatever it is going around. And so people buy a race car, but they don't even know really what all they have to have and how they have to enter, and the prize, the entrance money and all that kind of thing. Or even something like, I know people who buy a firearm because they want a firearm, but they know nothing about firearms. And they may be dangerous, or the firearm just may sit under the bed and rust. Or they may go take lessons and understand and read about and watch other people how to take care of their firearm and how to practice with it. So there's a lot of topics. Go ahead. You had one more to mention there.
Oh, no, and you get these unscrupulous contractors and consultants that, and obviously I'm not saying that everybody's like that, but there's a lot of them out there, and they basically just take shortcuts every step of the way to collect a paycheck. And excuse me, I had to walk in and clean up a lot of that and explain why, and I hate doing that, but, I have to explain why these people were wrong and how they kind of misled you on things. And, what kind of how, because how I adopted it is I felt so bad because they were so nice and that people were taking advantage of that. And I said, okay, this is crazy. Let me help you. It took a little bit for them to actually trust me because they had been burned so badly. But I said, give me a shot, and I got you through this. I'll get you through the rest. And now it's very nice because they are so appreciative of the work I do. I mean, I'm constantly, thank you, you're so great. What would we do without you? So that's nice. But it is, it's fun, but it's also frustrating that that they were misled. I know that some of the people involved, and they told her this was going to be easy, and I can take care of this. And these are people who are just kind of somewhat in the business, so even they didn't know what they didn't know, and that made it very difficult.
Yeah, that's a good phrase right there. Who was the guy that said that back about the Gulf War many years ago? Well, there's things we things we know we don't know, and there's things we don't know that we don't know.
Right. Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really the situation, is they got these people to help them out, who didn't know what they didn't know. And it was important stuff, just things that you had to know to do this. And, because they were a nonprofit, they had a shoestring budget. They didn't know that they should probably hire somebody who knows what they're doing to walk them through the process.
Right. Exactly. All right. Chris, good story to open up with. Hey, you want to tease a little bit what we're going to hear about after our next break? What interesting thing you've been working on?
And this one will probably be a little more combined because, the story is not nearly as long. But I did a project just recently with a transmitter that had a bad IPA in it. And I had to work on that. I was looking at the other idea or the other thing I wanted to talk about. Oh, yeah. So there's the IPA, and then there's also I've been working a lot in getting connectivity at remote sites, and I had a fun little one the other day that I dealt with. So those are the two that we'll talk about next.
All right, we'll get to those. Chris Tarr is with us, and Chris, we've say, Chris, you've got enough projects built up that let's talk about them. And hey, maybe some of them will help somebody else. And we sure hope it will. That's our whole purpose for being here, is to relate stories in this mass medium, the internet, so that we can maybe help you. So, hey, our show is brought to you in part by Broadcast Bionics and a product that they make called Camera One. It is amazing. And rather than me talk about it, I'm just going to let them talk about it. So check this out. We'll be right back.
Camera One from Broadcast Bionics, designed to bring video to your audio content. Visualizing radio and podcasts for social media. Camera One can automatically create, capture and brand professionally switched video for live streaming or upload, making your production shareable. Control and configure using a web browser on any device. Camera One is available as a 4-camera or 8-camera system using the Blackmagic A10 Mini range, including the A10 Mini Extreme. You can use cameras to suit your studio and your budget. You'll need one camera for a studio wide shot and usually one camera per microphone. A standard multi-channel sound card or IP driver monitors audio from each studio microphone, and we work natively with Axia systems. Ideally, this will be a post-fader feed from each mic, although you can use pre-fade audio or a mic split if that's all you have available. These audio levels are used to intelligently switch the video feed when each contributor is talking. You can also group microphones together into one shot and use the audio from a mixer's aux bus. You can use Camera One's auto switch feature, or disable it and switch using the on-screen buttons or the buttons on the A10. Recordings can automatically start when you tell the system you're on the air. This on-air indication can be linked to your studio's red lights via IP or an Avantec Adam GPIO interface. You can quickly browse all the videos that have been automatically created during your broadcast, download them, and post. Camera One is a user-installable system. You'll need a good spec Windows 10 PC, i7 with plenty of storage, and 16 gig of RAM. It's better if this machine isn't used for anything else. Remember, you can control the software in a web browser on another device on your network. Camera One, a thrifty way of creating scroll-stopping video from your show or podcast from Broadcast Bionics.
One of the cool things about Bionics is that they come out with innovative ideas that and most of which end up catching on really big in the broadcast industry, and they come out with it years before anybody else. So I really hats off to them. You ought to check out the full catalog of what Broadcast Bionics does in terms of making your broadcasting better, giving you fantastic social media integration. And hey, your on-air talent pretty much just does what they do anyway, but they capture it and control it and publish it in new and exciting ways. That is Broadcast Bionics at bionics.co.uk, or talk to your favorite broadcast equipment dealer. They're probably a Broadcast Bionics dealer as well. Thanks so much, Broadcast Bionics, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. It's Kirk Harnack and Chris Tarr, who is often our co-host on the show. Today, Chris is the star of the show because he's got stuff to talk about. Chris, it reminds me of your last story, reminds me of something that happened to me. Man, it must have been 35 years ago. A couple of sweet ladies bought an AM radio station in northern Mississippi, an AM radio station, but there was some kind, I don't know if it was them or the previous owner, of falling out with the people who owned the property where the tower was. Now, they still had use of the tower, but they didn't have use of the outbuilding where the transmitter had been. So somebody moved the transmitter from that outbuilding to the studio in town about 3 miles away. And the ladies had been told, or at least they're under the impression, that they could just turn the transmitter on at the studio and connect it to some phone lines and send the signal out to the tower. And this is a kilowatt daytime station. And they didn't want to believe me, but I said, no, it's not.
You
how
definitely
it
don't
works.
want to load that into a phone line. I'll tell you that.
Right. Well, you will have an audience. Anybody who's using the phone lines.
Right. Exactly.
That's not going to. So yeah, I feel the pain of people who buy something and don't know what they've bought, and it's not easy. It's not what they think it was, or maybe it's easy enough they just don't know what to do, and they need to be pointed in the right direction and shown how to do it. So
right, and a lot of times these people they really want to do it. So I kind of feel like, okay, I got to help you live this out. So
yeah, good way to put it. Help you live this out. All right, so we've got transmitter's bad IPA and connectivity at transmitter sites.
Let's do the IPA. So a little backstory for those watching that may not know kind of the stages of an FM transmitter. Historically, you've had a couple of levels of amplification. You start out with an exciter, then there's what's called the IPA or intermediate power amplifier, and then the final amplifier. And the reason that there are 3 stages is historically there wasn't really a good way to do those power stages. For example, an exciter generally only provided 15 watts of drive, which was not nearly enough to power a final amplifier. So there was something in between that took that 15 watts and then ramped it up to 200 watts, 250 watts, whatever, which was enough drive for the final. Now, times have changed, and that doesn't really necessarily have to be the case anymore, at least for solid state or for tube transmitters. Solid state's a whole different animal. But the issue is that the IPA is just another stage of things that can fail. So one of the common workarounds is nowadays you can get amplifiers that function as an exciter and an IPA. And you can start with nothing and have 300, 400, 500 watts out, which is more than enough to feed a final power amplifier. And generally what you see is, you leave the transmitter as it is until something fails, and then you revisit that. So one of the backup transmitters I have at one of my very important sites actually is a QEI, and it's actually a really decent transmitter. It works really, really well. We've had no problems with it, except for when the IPA died. And it's very hard to get parts for a QEI. And
sorry, was that IPA? Was that a solid state or a tube IPA?
It was a solid state IPA.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I could take it apart. Maybe it's a FET, something like that. But, again, it wasn't loading correctly. And there's all these different things that go into at least a poorly designed IPA. We all know the story, right, about the 20K transmitters and their IPAs, which notoriously bad and would fail. And it got to the point where I think Harris sold them with a different amplifier because their IPAs were so bad. So this one developed a problem, and the IPA was going bad. And I was kind of thinking about what my options were with this. I could yank out the IPA, try to get it fixed or send it out to get fixed or whatever, and possibly deal with that again in the future. Or I have all of these NICOM transmitters sitting around. We originally used them for translators, but then we replaced them with some Gates Air stuff. And so, I have a bunch of spare NICOM transmitters. So I thought, well, why don't we use that as an IPA? Those transmitters are capable of doing 500 watts. I only need, I think it was 250 for drive. Cool. That's it's a really simple solution, except that it's not. The problem is that you have to carefully control the RF going into the transmitter when it's on and off. You can't just, flip the thing on and leave it there. So you have to find a way to get that IPA, that IPA to work in concert with the transmitter. So what do you do there? So, okay, we can wire it up to I use a Arc Plus. So, okay, I can wire up the mute of the NICOM along with the filament of the QEI. So when I hit the filament on, it'll actually synchronize and unmute the transmitter for the NICOM for the IPA. Mm-hmm. Well, NICOM uses a latching contact. So it requires a contact to be held open or held closed rather the whole time the transmitter's on.
Right.
If you all of a sudden that goes away, transmitter goes off. So now what? I found out that the Arc Plus, although it says it will send a latching relay, it really only holds for about 5 minutes and then releases. So it would work for a little bit and then it would shut off, or vice versa. So this is where kind of the bigger moral of the story comes in. I was talking to one of my engineers, one of my coworkers, and they came up with this Rube Goldberg, okay, if we take a slave relay and then we do this second relay, as they switch, they'll kind of go back and forth and they'll do all these things. And I said to him, they make latching relays. You can actually buy them and have them shipped to your door. So I went and I online on Amazon, $30, a really nice magnetic latching relay, which means that when you trigger it, it doesn't hold it open. It actually moves it from one side to the other and it's done. So if you lose power or whatever, it'll stay in whatever state it was in. So, I got that, put it in, wired it up, and it works perfectly. Does exactly what it means to do. The kind of the moral of that is that, this other solution may have worked. However, it wouldn't have been as reliable. It wouldn't be documented. No one would know how it worked. It would just be this black box. And I get it. The whole point was, hey, this will save some money by, using parts that we have on the shelf or whatever. But the reality of it is it doesn't save you money. It actually ends up costing you money, because in the future, when it inevitably fails, you're going to call on your backup transmitter. It's not going to work. So then you're going to have to go out there, and if you're not the guy who created this device, you're not going to know what's not working or why. So, there's that whole, when you're working on things, there's this whole price versus, long-term versus short-term cost. And especially this was a no-brainer. I mean, this was like a $30 relay. So that wasn't as big of a deal. But even with bigger ticket items, you do have to, at some point, think about, I could build something, but should I? Is that really going to, is the money saved up front really going to come back to bite you later? And I know there are a lot of people who pride themselves on building everything right out of the box. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there was a time back in the past where we had to do that because these things weren't mass produced. But nowadays, it's so easy to get these things and relatively inexpensive that I'd much rather do that. Buy a purpose-built device and that's documented. And in fact, the relay box I put in actually has a diagram of it right on the side. So you know exactly what, the colors of the wires and everything. So, that was a great example of something. Literally, it showed up from Amazon, took me 10 minutes to install and solve the problem. So, the lesson there is sometimes you just gotta, it's okay to take those shortcuts and buy something. I know it, you worry about losing your engineer card when you do that, but I ran into that at a different site actually. And that was something else I discussed just the other day on Facebook that I ran into with a power strip where, there's a power strip for a rack. I got a call that, in fact, that'll be the second. Yeah, let me go into that because that actually is on the same site where I was doing the networking thing. So I'll wrap that all into one story.
Tell you what. Can we take a little break and hear about something that you like that actually does solve a problem and doesn't take your engineer card either. In fact, I love this box. So I want to add dovetail into what you said. You used a magnetically latched relay, and many years ago I did two, I wish I could say I was smart enough to think of that myself, but another engineer friend of mine said, well, you could, because I needed a function where it would, even without power, it would hold one way. And then if I, gave it a temporary, gave it a momentary contact closure, it would go the other way and stay there. It would, it would stay where I set it, right? That's what a latching relay does. It stays where you set it, no matter if the power goes off and comes back on or whatever. It stays where you set it.
Well, but that's the key, though, is not all of them do that, because some of them, when they latch, they're held with electricity.
Right.
And that's why when you lose power, it'll go back to its normal state. Whereas the magnet one is actually a true latch where it charges the magnet, it flips, and then it stays in that position. And then another magnet pulls it back versus holding it and releasing it.
And there's also mechanically latched relays, too. I've never used one of those, but I've certainly seen them. Don't know if they're about the same price range or whatever, but the magnetically latched one worked just fine. And for some reason, we installed that on a Sparta FM transmitter at WEZI in Germantown, Tennessee, just outside of Memphis. Played easy music for easy people.
Nice.
So there's nothing wrong with a latching relay, and you're right. You can duplicate that functionality with a lot of electronics and software and stuff like that checks what was the state that I wrote into the memory before the power went out. You can do all that, but I like the latched relay. Hey, so when we come back, we'll hear Chris's next adventure and story, and our show is brought to you in part by Innovonics and this product that I love. And Chris, you feel free to jump in here if you've got a comment about it too. It's the Sophia HD Site Streamer. And so, it's not that they don't have just HD versions; they have other versions as well. I think we have an AM site streamer at our stations in Maui, as well as the HD radio site streamer. But this you can use it locally. You can tune it and adjust it locally with the knob and the menu, and that's great. And it has analog out and AES CBU digital out. I believe it has an AES 67 or Dante out. I don't remember if I'm using one of those or not, but this is a wonderfully reliable radio, and it has a web interface that's just fabulous. So this is from the folks at Innovonics, and we rely on this thing to get us in. Hey, is the RDS working? Is the pad data working on our HD2 and 3 and 4? Oh yeah, there's the back of it. Thank you, Suncast. And in fact, we do have them mounted side by side, just like that. We have an AM one and the HD one. And of course, the HD one also picks up analog FM. So you're going to probably want that as well. It does have 2 network jacks, one for your AOIP network with AES 67, and the other one is set up for your business network, or however you want to browse into it. It also gives you contact closures for different programmable things, loss of signal, loss of RDS, that sort of stuff. It's the Sophia 568 Site Streamer, and I can personally attest to this thing's usability, viability, and usefulness. Also, I see that it has SNMP, and that, ladies and gentlemen, makes Chris Tarr's socks roll up and down, doesn't it, Chris?
Oh yeah, nothing gets me going like SNMP. Those site streamers are so amazing. When I first joined Magnum Media, we have stations all over the state. They didn't have anything like that, or they didn't realize that those existed. So they really had no way to know what their stations were doing. And I said, well, listen, we take these and we put one in each market. We're golden. And they love it. They go, every day they go and check to hear how their stations are doing. They're great for me. Last night I got a call that one of our stations in La Crosse had an audio issue. And instead of trying to guess what it might be, or, I could log in. I got, you can set them up remotely to access. I keep mine behind a firewall, so I have VPN. Load it up. It streams the audio. I could hear exactly what was going on. I could make changes and hear the changes. In the olden days, that would have been a 3-hour drive up there to figure it out. This way, I could listen and tell right away what was wrong and went, oh, I know what that is, and took care of it. So those things are just so invaluable. And another thing in your toolbox, you could probably create something. I did originally use an SDR with a plugin for Chrome that streamed it. And, so I mean, there are ways to do it. But at that point, is it really worth it? So the site streamers are just, I love mine.
I love it like you do because it's something you can count on to tell you the truth. And one of the problems that we have with so many of our remote radio stations is we can't even get an employee to tell us, is the transmitter on or off, or is the audio on or off?
Right. Exactly.
And no matter how much because it's not their business to know. It should be, yes, but it's not. And so what I find is that, and again, love our people who are out there in the field. They have other jobs, but I'm telling you, 30 to 50% of the time we get wrong information from people telling us what's wrong. So we have to, run that against the engineer's filter as to what's really wrong.
How many times have they just said something sounds wrong? Something's funny. I don't know. There's just something, it sounds weird.
Or we often hear just we're off the air, or there's another station coming in on us. Why is our transmitter off? There's another station coming in, and it's ducting, just like you said.
Right. Sure.
Sure. So get yours from the folks at Broadcasters General Store. BGS is actually the sponsor of this little segment. BGS, Broadcasters General Store in Ocala, Florida, but it really doesn't matter where they are. They are fantastic. And they do have people working for them all around the country. But Broadcasters General Store is bgs.cc. bgs.cc is their website, and the great website. And also, they love to talk on the phone. So 352-622-7700 if you want to talk to a real person with real experience in helping you decide what you need, how long it'll take to get there, and the sharpest pencils to get you a great price. Thanks a lot, Broadcasters General Store, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Okay, Chris, we have the next topic. Tell us about it.
All right. So I have a site in Cold Spring, Wisconsin, which is just outside of Fort Atkinson. It's an AM directional, big, huge 5 towers. And I've also got an FM there, a Class A. And it is literally in a cornfield. It's basically what you would imagine a AM site out in the middle of nowhere would look like. So it turns out that thanks to the Rural Fiber Development Fund, I was able to get fiber out there, so that was good. I've got fiber to that site. It's on my WAN, so I can see everything over there. Except that there's 2 buildings. There's the main building, which houses the AM. That was the original building. And then the FM came well after the AM was built. The FM was added on. And what they did is it's on one of the AM towers. So what they did is they built another building next to that tower where the FM lives, and that's where it stays. So I've gotten networking into the main building, into the main AM building, but then I needed a way to get internet out to the other building because I needed a camera out there to see what's going on and everything else. So I tried a bunch of different things, and I was like, well, do I run fiber over there? Do I try to, it's a pretty long run. Can I get Cat 5 out there? So I ended up, I overthought it. I was like, okay, I went back to basics. And again, this is where, as engineers, we tend to over-engineer things. I was like, okay, wait a minute. The router that I use, the firewall that I use has wireless on it. Excuse me. If I can get that high enough in the air in the building, what if I could get a Wi-Fi extender and get that high in the other building and try that? So I ended up, I bought a Wi-Fi extender. I went to the AM building. I remounted the firewall high up on the wall so that the antennas were right up by the ceiling. And then I went to the other building, and that building had an outlet that was actually in the ceiling for something. So I took the extender, plugged that up into the ceiling. I bought an extender with an actual network jack so you could extend into a physical network, and it worked. I couldn't believe it. I was able to get just enough signal to make it work. So I was able to put a camera in there. But again, that was one of those things where I hadn't had internet in that building for quite a while because I kept overthinking it. I was like, well, I could go get Ubiquity stuff. I could do, a point-to-point link, all these things. Right. And it turns out the answer was simple, just a consumer Wi-Fi extender that you get for your house. And, but it took me a long time to actually, though, get the right height on both sides in order for it to work. The first time around, first couple times around, it didn't work. I couldn't get a connection. But then I realized, okay, if I can get high enough, I think I can make this work, because there's a height differential between the two buildings. So if I can get this high enough, it should work. And sure enough, it did. And now I can see that room.
Let me ask you about the path that the RF is taking, the Wi-Fi RF, because I've done a few. Normally Wi-Fi extenders we use in the home. I got some bedrooms upstairs that don't have enough signal from the router, so let's try a Wi-Fi extender at the outlet that's closest to the router that will still feed the bedrooms. And I've had that. I got one here at my house, and it works adequately. I have done an outdoor Wi-Fi hotspot that was a little bit directional at the cabin that I used to have to give me Wi-Fi down at the pool, but it went through a lot of trees to get down to the pool. That served that part of the subdivision, and it really didn't work all that well. What do you think made the biggest difference? You mentioned height, but what made you believe if I get these things to see each other without obstruction? What made you believe that this has a chance to work?
Well, we have a really nice, and now actually just recently, I got all the trees and everything out of there, which, cleared everything out, which was helpful. But I did have a clear path for driving from that tower to the main building. So I could see the buildings from one another, but they really are far. I mean, much farther than the typical distance of Wi-Fi. And I would barely get a signal on my computer sitting out in my car at that building. So I knew it was going to be a challenge, but then I also realized that, the antenna on my computer is okay, but it's not a long range antenna. So I just use the same principles that we use in RF. Okay. I got to find a nice line of sight path, unobstructed, and the higher the better, because that way it's clear of anything obstruction wise. So, and also you've got to think about, building walls, all those sorts of things. What's in the building that you have to shoot through? And, originally I had the extender, in the back corner, and I had the router kind of was by some equipment. And so I'm like, well, if I can get both of these things clear of everything and as high as possible, I can make this work, because I'm again, I was kept overthinking it. It's like, well, now I've got to get these ubiquity things, mount them outside the buildings. And I just kept thinking, it's like, I should be able to make this work somehow. And again, I mean, that does kind of fall under the, they make those, you could buy the ubiquity thing and be done. But, first of all, this wasn't an urgent project. This was just more of I really wanted it. So I could have a camera in there. So I had time to mess around, and it was more of a, can I do it? Does it actually work? And I was very pleased when it did. It was a simple, low cost solution. It didn't require separate ubiquity radios, because that was the other thing, is if those radios sometimes need to be rebooted, and I didn't want to have to deal with that. So to be able to do this, it's just one extra device which is over in the other building. It uses the existing router. So it just simplifies things, and it works really well.
Good point.
So
go ahead. I did something similar across a bean field in Mississippi. We have two transmitter sites that are probably maybe 0.2 of a mile apart, maybe 1/10. I mean, they're a few couple hundred yards. Yeah, probably 2 football fields apart. And I had internet easily available at one site, but not at the other. And I ended up doing it the ubiquity way, but I bought the cheapest small, like the nano beam. And
that's what I'm going to. I have a site where I'm going to do that. Yeah. It's going to be just a little too far.
I just had to be higher than the bean field, and it's really flat. I mean, the elevation doesn't change more than 1/8 of an inch for miles and miles, and so just had to be careful of the farmer driving his tractor, messing up the beam. but that worked fine for years. We ended up doing something better later. I think maybe I forgot the password that I had used on the ubiquitous at one point.
Well, the other thing to think about is, in this situation, it wasn't critical that this thing worked really well. It just had to work well enough to stream some video and SNMP. So, I didn't really need anything that was mission critical. Now, I have something similar to what you're talking about, where I've got 2 towers, maybe a quarter mile away. You can literally see them from each side. Mm-hmm. And I needed to get data over there. but I had audio over that data too. So that's where I went with the really high-end ubiquity radios and that sort of thing. So there is a time and a place to really spend the money. And then there's this, and this, like I said, it wasn't an urgent thing. It wasn't worth, spending a ton of money on to make it work. So, okay, we'll say, that's one place where, okay, if I can save some money, that's probably worth it.
Yeah. Okay.
So at the same site, part 2 of the story is, and this is why I love cameras. I got a call that the station was off, and nobody knew why. And this is where troubleshooting really starts to come into play, and why it's good to be a good troubleshooter. So all is the station is off, and it's off. They're static because I used my tuner, and I site streamer. I logged in, and I could hear that there was it was off the air. So, okay, what's going on? Is the transmitter failed? I've got to run out there. So do I need to bring a backup transmitter? Do I, all kinds of things, of course, as run through your head. The tower fall, what's going on? So, I took a minute, like I always do, sometimes drives people nuts, to just think about it and go, okay, step by step by step. Well, I then realized, well, you know what? If the power is out in that building or in that area, then a whole lot of things are not going to work. But what I also know is that the AM transmitter is in this other building. However, its STL is in that same rack. So if the AM transmitter is on but silent, we know what's going on. So I grabbed the camera and I pointed the camera at the transmitter, and there's no modulation. So I'm like, okay, now I know I'm not having to bring a transmitter out there or anything else. This is a simple case of something is not providing power out there. Mm-hmm. So I hop in the car, I get out there, and sure enough, there's no power in this rack. So next is, okay, what's going on? I checked the breakers. All the breakers were good. So I went around behind the rack, and I posted the picture on Facebook, and you see this power strip, and the cable of the power strip comes up over, and then because it actually comes out of the ceiling. The cord was coming out of the ceiling. It came down and then went through a copper wire wrapped around a copper strap, and that was the strain relief for the strip. So, that already,
I saw this picture. Yeah.
Yes, that already raised some eyebrows. But then you look a little bit closer and you see that this power strip has been there so long that the jacket on the power cord has deteriorated. And it has deteriorated long enough that somebody before me wrapped the cable in electrical tape to keep to keep it going, keep it together. So you could see where the cable went through that copper strain relief, where it finally arced over and shorted itself out and took everything off. Again, that was a situation where somebody went, oh, these are expensive. I'm just going to patch it up and, save a couple of bucks. Well, it didn't, because we were off the air and I had to run out there and all these things. And relatively speaking, new power strips are not that expensive. You can get a nice one, it's shipped to my door, and I got one with a surge suppressor on it, and, not the cheap little consumer one. So this is, professional grade, a power strip. Yeah. And I put that in, and I put in actual strain relief and, all these other things, and the problem was solved. But it kind of went back to that, twice now in the past 2 weeks, where I've run into something like that, where I go, that was a bad repair. And somebody had good intentions, they're going to save a couple of dollars by just patching it up. But in the long term, it was an awful idea. and we're lucky that it didn't cause any more problems than what it did. It didn't start a fire or, blow out any equipment. It just shorted out the power strip. But it really kind of frustrated me, because it's like, they make those. They ship them to your door. They're not expensive. If you get to the point where you're using electrical tape on it, maybe you ought to think about replacing it. And then, then the other thing is, why did you put it through a copper wire tied to a copper strap? Where did that thought come from? Because guess what? Copper conducts electricity pretty well. Yeah. So maybe you want to rethink that. So, that was my experience at that site.
Well, Chris, we talked a little bit about the weather early in the show. You said you had some rain in northern Wisconsin. Has it been hot there much?
It has. And that is its own set of problems because a lot of our sites here don't have air conditioning because you don't typically need it. Right. And, as things over the past few years have gotten warmer, we are dealing with, there's a couple of days a year where I have to reduce power on things because it gets too hot. So, that's been an issue for us.
Well, here in West Tennessee, we got some warnings out for heat warnings and things like that. But I'll tell you what, in West Tennessee, toward the Mississippi River in the lower Mississippi River Valley, it's been so hot. It's been so hot that the crackheads have been putting the copper back in the AC units.
Here, I knew there was something. I knew there was a punchline coming.
That's hilarious. Sliding into this one. Thank you, Suncast.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Well, Chris is going to have a tip of the week, and I may as well. I've got a little story to tell that's kind of interesting too. But right now, we're going to hear from two of our amazing sponsors, and one of those is Angry Audio. And since Chris is here today, I'm going to implore Mr. Tarr to talk about mic processing because the owner of Angry Audio specifically asked me, when Chris is on, would you please have him talk about mic processing? He thinks there's value.
I'd be happy to oblige, especially since I'm using it right now. We are talking about the Angry Audio Rebel processor. As you can see here, I'm using an Electro Voice RE20. And for the longest time, because I do voice tracking and I do voice work, I've been trying to find something that sounds good. And, there's all these mic processors out there, and I could never replicate the sound that I wanted because they're all different. All these processors, even with the same ones, you can copy the settings and it just never sounds the same. So when Angry Audio was setting out to maybe make a mic processor, Catfish, Mike Dosh, knew this. And he said, well, the problem with mic processors is there's too many controls to them. They're too complicated. And, because there's just so many, these different things you can change. So he sat down with Corny Gold and said, can we make a mic processor that doesn't have so many knobs and buttons? And Corny said, well, no, because the problem is you don't know what kind of mic you're hooking up to it. And each mic sounds different. And that's when Catfish had the brilliant idea and asked the question, what if we did know? What if we knew what mic was going to plug into this and we could tailor it to that microphone? And that's where they all went, oh yeah, now that's a whole different story because we know kind of the broad strokes of what we need to have to make these microphones sound good. So that's where you get into the Angry Audio Chameleon Rebel and the Smooth. And what they are their mic processors that are purpose built. So the Rebel is for the RE20, that's the RE in Rebel, and the Smooth is for the SM7 or SM5. The SM in Smooth stands for this and for the SM7. So you've got these two microphone processors that are set and tailored to those particular microphones. So really the controls on these devices, there aren't very many. There's a couple of controls for gating and the amount of compression you need and the EQ. And I'll tell you right now, I'm only running a tiny little bit of compression on this microphone, and it already makes me sound a whole lot bigger. And as you can see on the back, you've got all kinds of I/O. The front panel, very nice looking. That front cover comes off, and that's where the controls are. And they're just little set it and forget it type of knobs, full metering on the front. And again, once you set it up, you close it, and it's consistent from person to person to person. From, every time I sit down, the microphone's going to sound the same. So it's a great way to get great sounding audio on your microphones in your station. And also not only just great sounding audio, but consistent audio from each of your microphones. And you'll know that because you buy the processor that fits with the microphone and you're done. Out of the box, without even adjusting anything, they sound good. But if you're the kind who likes to tweak and customize, you get a little bit of that too. So check it out. You can check them out online, angryaudio.com. It's the Rebel for the RE20 and the Smooth for the SM7. Fantastic mic processors. I'm using them now. I love it. I bought my own. I love them so much. Check it out today at angryaudio.com.
Thank you very much, Chris Tarr, and appreciate your endorsement of the Angry Audio mic processing. Well, Max Connect is another one of our sponsors, and Max Connect, they're always looking for ways to help you stay connected at difficult sites. And I know that Chris has some experience with these, but they have, I think there's a graphic that Suncast might be able to throw up. Depending on your situation, and how much data you plan to use, and the reliability that you might need, you can go with a MaxConnect 4G LTE router with prioritized data and a fixed IP address, or you can also go with a satellite service from MaxConnect, or you can go with both. You can have one back up the other. If you've got a site where, by golly, you've got to have data connectivity all the time, even if the cell network is down, the satellite network will most likely be up. But maybe the cell data costs you less than the satellite data, or maybe there's a balance that you can tell it to automatically achieve between those two. Well, MaxConnect makes this possible. And on screen, there's a simplified diagram of how this might go together for you. But the people at MaxConnect are glad to consult with you and help you decide what is going to work for you, for your transmitter sites, even for your remote broadcasts. You probably won't take a satellite dish to the remote broadcast, but MaxConnect's 4G LTE systems, their modems and routers, can absolutely make your remote broadcasts work great. Where internet may or may not be available or reliable. If you're depending on maybe the other team to provide you with internet in the press box, well, yeah, that should be easy enough, but it may not always be there. So take a backup. Anytime you need a backup, boy, this is great from MaxConnect, the 4G LTE service. Go to the website. It is MaxConnect. I know it's spelled funny because the internet and, the names are taken. MaxConnect, MaxConnect.com for prioritized data across the internet. And it works just about anywhere. Check it out. I love mine. It has saved the day on numerous occasions when we've had disasters and bad weather and remote sites where we needed some temporary connectivity until the other stuff got installed. I've probably used it half a dozen times now in the last 3 or 4 years. All right. Thanks a lot, MaxConnect, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Chris, I had a little troubleshooting experience here lately. I won't mention the names to protect the innocent, but we have a station owner who is not a technical guy. He knows what he wants, but he's not real technical. And he unfortunately had not a single, but a double air conditioning failure at a transmitter site. And inside this transmitter site, he has an FM transmitter that is for his FM translator for his AM. It's co-located with the AM station. And unfortunately, the transmitter got way too hot. Now, I didn't have the time or the tools to fix it. I don't do that full time anymore. I did many years ago. So we contacted another engineer to have him fix it. But I was there to swap out. This station owner got a backup transmitter. He didn't have one on site, but he borrowed one or rented one from another local contract engineer. I helped him put that in place. And the other engineer took got hold of the broken transmitter, took it apart. He says basically it caught on fire inside because it just got too dang hot. And he said, the company that made this is out of business. There is a company supplying parts, he says, but I don't think it's worthwhile. So anyway, air conditioning and backup air conditioning can be really, really important. This transmitter caught on fire. He sent me a picture of it, and I said, yeah, I agree with you. That's probably not worth saving, especially since expertise is gone. If there's any special parts in there, they're not available, or at least not at any kind of reasonable price. Have you ever had stuff catch on fire at a transmitter site, Chris?
Close. I've had transmitter sites get really hot, but never anything spontaneously combusting.
Yeah. I had like serial number 1 or 2 of a big 50 kilowatt Nautel catch on fire. It was the combining box and the matching box.
Oh, sure.
And it literally caught on fire. We had days and days of cleaning up, which we did. And it's worked fine for years since then.
I've had a Continental 816 that started on fire. Had nothing to do with heat, though. I do have my tip that I wanted to get out because it actually kind of goes along with what we're talking about here. Yeah. I have a location where, first of all, I needed to know what the temperature was. And I also needed to know if the generator kicked in because there was no contacts or anything to let me know that the generator turned on. It turns out that for a couple $100 on Amazon, a company called Necto, Necto, has a cellular-based little box, and it uses IoT data, so it's really cheap. Actually, I think the first 2 years are free. And essentially, you plug this into a regular outlet. It has a battery in it. You plug it into a non-backed up outlet. And what happens is it'll tell you if the power goes out. But not only that, it monitors the temperature and humidity. And it can send you text messages, or it can send you emails, or both. They've got an app so you can spot check it. And I've started buying these for all of my sites because I did have a situation where, again, like you, I had a main and a backup air conditioner, and both failed. And I actually didn't know that until one of the other tenants called and said, hey, I'm having an issue here. And it's like, 90 degrees in the building. And I really had no way of knowing that. So I was like, thinking about it. And I talked to my coworker, Dave, and he was like, yeah, let's put them in on all our sites. I mean, it's great to have. We'll know if the generator's on. We'll know if it's too hot, too cold, whatever. And again, for a couple $100 for this little device, it takes like 3 minutes to set up. It's a great deal.
Is it getnecto.com? They advertise pet monitors, but I'm sure they do.
Yeah, I think it is Necto. I did. I just got it from Amazon. Just did a search for it, but they are fantastic little devices. They're so handy. Cool.
This whole Internet of Things is pretty interesting. There's one more. I know we had seconds left. I had a failure of an IP radio link recently that ended up taking a translator off the air myself in Mississippi, and there was nobody technical around there to really help out. I sent one guy out there to at least. He said he unpowered the IP radio because we thought it was the IP radio at the destination end, at the transmitter site, and and that didn't fix it. So we had a spare IP radio on site, but nobody to travel there yet and replace it. Well, an engineer did go there finally and replace it, and what we found out was that the problem wasn't the IP radio; it was simply the inexpensive, dumb, non-managed Ethernet switch. He rebooted the Ethernet switch, and that fixed the problem. But the weird thing is, I thought the guy who sent to the transmitter side, I thought he said that he rebooted power cycled the Ethernet switch, but apparently not, because that didn't do it. I mean, it stayed broken. So, all right, Chris, thanks for all the advice. I know that Suncast has got to go, and we've been talking long enough. Appreciate your tip of the week and all your stories too, Chris. Thank you so very much.
Happy to do it. As you know me, I like to talk.
Well, we like to hear you talk, man. Hey, in fact, coming up next week, we have another talker, and that would be Nick D. He is a real radio aficionado, and he's got some interesting insights on the things that he hears across the country. Nick D. And after that, Dave Anderson is going to report on some interesting AOIP adventures. So you'll want to stick around for that. Thanks again to Chris Tarr for being with us. Thanks to Suncast for producing yet another show. Really appreciate you, sir. And we'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.